In the scorching sands of Egypt's western desert, a remote railway station became the stage for one of World War II's defining moments. The Second Battle of El Alamein, fought from October 23rd to November 11th, 1942, where Allied forces turned the tide against the Axis powers. At its heart was the daring assault by Australian troops that shattered German defences, delivering a profound psychological blow that signalled the war's momentum shifting irreversibly. Picture the vast arid expanse under a relentless sun, tanks rumbling across dusty plains, and soldiers entrenched in a landscape that amplified every strategic decision and logistical challenge. For 2 years prior, the North African front had been a brutal pendulum of offensives and retreats, with Axis forces under the legendary Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, capturing Tobruk in June 1942 and pushing to within 60 miles of Alexandria, threatening the vital Suez Canal and Middle Eastern oil fields essential for Allied supply lines. Allied morale had plummeted after defeats like Dunkirk and Singapore, but the arrival of General Bernard Montgomery in August 1942 changed everything. He amassed an overwhelming force of 195,000 troops, 1,029 tanks including fresh American Shermans, and over 800 guns against the Axis's 116,000 men. 547 tanks, many of which were outdated Italian models, and 552 guns. Rommel, hampered by illness and chronic supply shortages from Allied interdiction of Mediterranean convoys, had constructed the infamous Devil's Gardens, vast minefields sown with over 500,000 anti-tank and anti-personnel mines, intertwined with barbed wire, trenches, and pre-sighted machine gun nests designed to funnel attackers into deadly killing zones. Yet Axis intelligence underestimated the Allies' preparation and resolve, setting the stage for a grueling attritional battle where geography played a starring role. The battlefield at El Alamein, located about 60 miles west of Alexandria at coordinates roughly 30 degrees 50 minutes north and 28 degrees 57 minutes east, formed a narrow 40-mile-wide corridor squeezed between the Mediterranean Sea to the north and the impassable Qattara Depression to the south, a sunken, salt-encrusted basin spanning over 7,000 square miles and dropping to 436 feet below sea level, riddled with quicksand-like marshes and steep escarpments that rendered it utterly unusable for heavy vehicles or tanks, effectively channeling all military movements into this confined strip of firmer desert ground. Key features included low ridges like Materia Ridge, Kidney Ridge, or Hill 28, and Tel El Asa, which provided crucial elevated positions for observation, artillery spotting, and defensive fire, while the northern sector featured rocky outcrops and coastal roads that favoured close-quarters combat but exposed supply routes to naval bombardment. This bottleneck prevented the wide flanking manoeuvres typical of desert warfare, forcing both sides into direct, costly frontal assaults reminiscent of World War I trench warfare, where dust storms kicked up by bombardments reduced visibility to mere yards, causing chaotic traffic jams in minefield corridors and exposing advancing troops to deadly Axis anti-tank fire from the feared 88mm guns. For the Axis, the terrain initially favoured their defensive strategy, with Rommel positioning elite units like the 164th Light Africa Division and the Ramka Parachute Brigade in interlocking strongpoints alternated with Italian formations to bolster morale. But fuel shortages, worsened by Allied attacks on convoys from Malta, limited their ability to redeploy Panzer reserves swiftly, turning potential mobility advantages into liabilities. On the Allied side, the confined space allowed Montgomery to leverage air superiority from the Desert Air Force, which flew over 1,000 sorties daily, and massive artillery barrages to blast through defences, though the minefields caused high initial casualties during clearances using innovative detectors and flail tanks. Heavy rains in the battle's later stages further bogged down the pursuit, allowing a partial Axis escape but underscoring how the environment amplified logistical strains, with Axis troops rationed to 1 pint of water daily amid the heat. Leading the Axis was Erwin Rommel, whose tactical brilliance had earned him mythic status, but his absence due to health issues at the battle's outset left command to General Georg Stumme, who suffered a fatal heart attack on October 24th amid the initial chaos, forcing Rommel's hurried return from Germany on October 25th, where he found his forces already reeling from the onslaught. Rommel's strategy relied on a deep defensive network to bleed the Allies in a war of attrition, anticipating piecemeal attacks he could counter with his Panzers, but he disregarded logistics, stretching supply lines 1,400 miles from Tripoli and ignoring national objectives, leading to critical shortages that hampered his famous blitzkrieg tactics. Indeed, historical analyses note that Rommel had previously defeated superior forces through deception and speed, but at El Alamein, poor intra-theatre distribution and sunk tankers like the Proserpina on October 26th left his tanks immobilized. In contrast, Montgomery, or Monty, orchestrated the offensive with meticulous planning, emphasizing overwhelming firepower and morale-building visits to troops, his flamboyant style, including his signature beret with 2 badges, replacing Rommel as the object of admiration for his men, while his strategy involved infantry crumbling German defenses in phases before armored exploitation, using deceptions like Operation Bertram with dummy tanks and pipelines to mislead Axis reconnaissance about the attack's timing and location. Central to this was Lieutenant General Leslie Morshead, commander of the Australian 9th Division, nicknamed Ming the Merciless for his stern leadership and dubbed Ali Baba by Axis propagandist Lord Haw Haw, who led his 20,000 thieves, the battle-hardened diggers forged in the siege of Tobruk, drawing on lessons from that earlier engagement to conduct pre-battle intelligence gathering raids called peaceful penetrations that mapped minefields and eroded Axis positions. Frontline leaders like Lieutenant Colonel William Hack Weir of the 248th Battalion exemplified the aggressive spirit, leading charges that overran Point 23 in mere minutes, while heroes such as Sergeant William Kibbe, who earned a posthumous Victoria Cross for single-handedly silencing machine gun nests under heavy fire during the October 23rd to 31st assaults despite being wounded, embodied the division's tenacity. One account recalls Kibbe charging forward with grenades and a submachine gun, inspiring his platoon amid the din of battle. Other notables included General Hermann Bernhard Ramke, whose elite Fallschirmjäger paratroopers defended key outcrops with veteran resolve, and Lieutenant General Oliver Leese of the 33rd Corps, overseeing the northern assaults where the Australians held the line. The Australian 9th Division, comprising brigades like the 20th, 24th and 26th, excelled in close-quarters combat with Owen submachine guns and bayonets, their role pivotal in pinning Axis reserves in the north, diverting the 90th Light and Panzer divisions to allow central breakthroughs, though at a cost, suffering 22% of 8th Army casualties, with about 1,000 in the initial phases alone, including 620 killed and 1,944 wounded overall for the division, enhancing Australia's wartime reputation but sparking domestic debates over recalling troops for the Pacific Theatre. Personal stories abound, like that of Private Roderick Charles Much, a 9th Division soldier who survived the intense fighting only to reflect later on the camaraderie amid horror, or brothers Hector and Tom Chadwick, both serving in Australian units, with Hector killed in the assaults, highlighting the human toll on families back home. Another tale comes from Muhammad Umar, an Indian soldier in the Allied forces whose unit supported the Australians, underscoring the multinational nature of the 8th Army, which included British, New Zealand, South African and Free French troops alongside the diggers. Axis stakeholders, including German High Command and Italian allies under Mussolini, aimed to capture Suez to control Mediterranean shipping and link with Caucasus forces, but suffered a psychological blow. Captured officers confessed the Australian breakthrough revealed fatal vulnerabilities, with one diary entry noting shock at the assault's whirlwind speed that disrupted communications before effective reaction. Broader impacted parties extended to Egyptian civilians, who avoided occupation but endured economic disruptions from the front lines, and global strategy, where the victory boosted Allied morale while weakening Axis positions, coinciding with Operation Torch landings on November 8th, to create a pincer trapping 250,000 Axis troops in Tunisia. Controversies persist over Montgomery's credit stealing from Commonwealth forces, with Australian historians arguing the 9th Division's contributions are underappreciated in British narratives, and Italian soldiers, often lacking motorised support, were abandoned in retreats leading to mass surrenders and dehydration deaths. The battle unfolded in distinct phases, beginning with the prelude in September-October 1942, where Allied reinforcements arrived and minor actions like Operation Braganza tested defences, while the Australians conducted raids to gather intelligence on mine layouts. Then came the break-in phase of Operation Lightfoot on October 23rd at 9:40 p.m, with a colossal barrage from nearly 1,000 guns firing 529,000 shells in 15 minutes, illuminating the night sky like daylight and allowing Australian infantry to charge through cleared minefield corridors with bayonets fixed, navigating gaps identified from prior penetrations. One veteran recalled the ground shaking as if from an earthquake, dust choking the air as they overran points 23 and 26 in the northern sector, elite-held positions integrated into Rommel's network, with Weir's 248th Battalion annihilating a German battalion headquarters in minutes, capturing hundreds of prisoners and disrupting command lines. This wasn't just tactics. It exposed flaws in German doctrine, unprepared for such savage close-quarters fighting where diggers used grenades and bayonets in hand-to-hand combat, with accounts describing the eerie silence after the barrage broken by shouts and gunfire. German counterattacks by the 15th Panzer Division were piecemeal and repelled, fuel shortages forcing them to dig in rather than maneuver, while the Desert Air Force bombed supply dumps relentlessly. The crumbling phase from October 26th to November 1st saw diversionary pushes, including the Australians capturing Point 29 on October 25th to 29th, despite 317 casualties from the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment, wearing down Axis reserves amid tank battles at Kidney Ridge, where Allied anti-tank guns and aircraft turned the tide. One pilot's log described diving on panzer formations, scattering them like ants. Kibbe's actions across these days included leading his platoon after his commander fell, clearing trenches under fire, his final charge on October 31st costing his life but saving his men. Montgomery shifted plans when initial armour advances stalled, launching Operation Supercharge on November 2nd, with another barrage supporting New Zealand and British infantry to open gaps at Tel el-Akakir, where the 9th Armoured Brigade charged, losing 70 tanks but destroying 35 Axis guns in the hammering of the Panzers, reducing Axis armour from 249 to 36 by November 4th. Rommel, defying Hitler's victory or death order, ordered retreat on November 4th, his forces exhausted and out of fuel, with Italians like the Littorio Division destroyed or abandoned. The pursuit phase from November 5th to 11th saw Allies advance to Mersa Matruh on November 7th and clear the Egyptian border by November 11th, though rain turned the desert to mud, slowing the chase and allowing Rommel to escape with remnants. Casualties were staggering. Allies totaled 13,560 with 2,350 killed, 8,950 wounded and 2,260 missing, while Axis suffered around 59,000, including 2,000 to 9,000 dead or missing, 4,800 to 15,000 wounded, and 30,000 to 49,000 prisoners, disproportionately affecting Italians, with total Axis tanks lost at 500 and guns at 254. Short-term impacts included the Axis retreat 1,400 miles to Tunisia, boosting Allied confidence. Churchill proclaimed on November 10, "This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is, perhaps, the end of the beginning, and enabling torch to encircle remaining forces." Long-term, it led to Axis expulsion from North Africa by May 1943, diverting German resources from the Eastern Front, opening paths to Sicilian and Italian invasions in 1943, and influencing strategies like Normandy with emphasis on logistics and combined arms. Human costs rippled through families, with national heroes like Kibbe remembered in memorials. while systemically it shifted warfare toward attrition, favoring resource-rich allies, highlighting minefield vulnerabilities and air artillery integration. In larger contexts, it secured Middle Eastern oil, strengthened US-British alliances, and weakened Germany amid Stalingrad, though some historians note its decisiveness is sometimes overstated, with Axis defeat multifaceted due to overcommitments. Yet El Alamein's convergence of terrain, timing, and tenacity not only shattered Axis invincibility, but laid foundational stones for victory in Europe, a testament to the diggers' whirlwind assaults that turned the tide in the desert. Expanding on the logistical nightmare, the Axis's defeat was as much about supply lines as soldiering. Rommel's disregard for logistics, relying on captured Allied fuel that often ran dry, contrasted with British methodical planning that provided unlimited support, with ports like Alexandria flowing with American Lend-Lease materiel, ensuring Montgomery's forces had the ammunition for barrages that fired more shells in one night than in entire previous campaigns. One analysis points out that without Malta-based submarines and aircraft sinking 77% of Axis shipping in 1942, Rommel might have pressed on, but interdictions. Like the destruction of the Proserpina left his panzers static targets. Personal anecdotes from German side include Rommel's own diary entries expressing frustration at Hitler's interference, while Montgomery's letters reveal his confidence in hitting the enemy for six. Cricket metaphors motivating his troops. Australian veterans, like those from the 248th Battalion, recounted the terror of minefields, where S-mines, or bouncing Bettys, would leap up and explode at waist height. Yet their training from Tobruk, where they held against siege for 8 months, instilled a resilience that saw them advance under fire without hesitation. One soldier recalling, "You didn't have time to get frightened," as the barrage lifted. The role of ultra-intelligence cannot be understated, decrypting Enigma messages to reveal Axis dispositions, allowing Montgomery to anticipate counterattacks, such as knowing Rommel's return and fuel status, tilting the odds further. In the southern sector, Free French and New Zealand forces faced tough Italian paratroopers like the Folgore Division, who fought valiantly despite equipment shortages, with one account of hand-to-hand fighting in the dark highlighting the battle's brutality across lines. Aftermath saw Rommel's reputation tarnished, though he remained a respected foe, while Montgomery rose to fame, commanding D-Day forces later, but debates rage over whether his caution prolonged the battle. With some arguing, a bolder push could have annihilated the Afrika Korps entirely. Economically, securing the Suez prevented Axis access to oil that could have fueled their war machine longer, influencing global realignments as the US entered more fully. Commemorations today at the El Alamein War Cemetery, where over 7,200 Commonwealth graves stand, remind us of the sacrifice, with annual ceremonies honouring the fallen from all nations, including Germans and Italians, in nearby sites. In retrospect, the Second Battle of El Alamein wasn't just a clash of arms, but a symphony of strategy, supply, and spirit, where the Australian 9th Division's ferocious charges epitomised the Allied resurgence, paving the way from desert sands to European liberation. To delve deeper into individual valour, consider Private Alfred Palmerston Cobden, an Australian gunner who manned his post under relentless shelling, or Walter Babington Thomas, a New Zealand commander whose brigade supported the diggers in Supercharge, losing hundreds but breaking the line. Logistically, the British repaired railways and built water pipelines from the Nile, ensuring hydration in 120-degree heat, while Axis troops suffered dysentery from contaminated supplies, weakening their resolve. Rommel's post-battle report blamed superiors for inadequate reinforcements, but his own aggressive style overextended lines, a lesson in balancing tactics with sustainment. Montgomery's training regime, drilling troops in mine clearance and night attacks, paid dividends, with simulations in the rear areas mimicking the Devil's Gardens to reduce panic under fire. The air war was decisive too, with RAF Hurricanes and Spitfires achieving superiority, downing 97 Axis aircraft for 77 losses, bombing columns that left craters the size of houses. One pilot's memoir describes the satisfaction of strafing panzers, watching them brew up in flames. On the ground, engineers like those in the Royal Australian Engineers cleared paths with Bangalore torpedoes, risking life amid booby traps, their work enabling the infantry's advance. The battle's phases also included psychological warfare, with Allied leaflets dropped on Italian lines urging surrender, contributing to high prisoner numbers. In the crumbling operations, Australians executed Chinese attacks, feints to draw fire, exhausting German artillery, a tactic Moorehead perfected from Tobruk. Kibbe's citation reads like a Hollywood script. His coolness gave impetus to the initial momentum, which carried him through his objective. But it cost him dearly. After the breakout, the pursuit saw light armoured cars harassing retreating columns, capturing stragglers dehydrated and defeated. By November 11th, Egypt was clear, and the road to Tunisia open, leading to the surrender of 250,000 Axis troops in May 1943, a blow from which Germany never recovered. Churchill's quote encapsulates it: "Before Alamein, we never had a victory. After Alamein, we never had a defeat," though critics note subsequent setbacks like Market Garden. Nonetheless, El Alamein's legacy endures in military doctrine, teaching the primacy of logistics, Rommel's genius undone by empty fuel tanks, and the power of multinational cooperation, with Australians proving indispensable. Today, the site is a museum and memorial, where visitors walk the ridges and contemplate the cost of freedom, a fitting tribute to those who turned the tide in the desert. Expanding further, the First Battle of El Alamein in July 1942 under General Claude Auchinleck had already stalled Rommel, inflicting 10,000 casualties for 13,250 Allied. But Montgomery's sequel was more decisive, building on that foundation with superior planning. Rommel's health, suffering from jaundice and nose diphtheria, forced his leave, and upon return, he found Stumer dead and lines cracking, writing to his wife Lou of the swarming Allied attacks. Montgomery's deception included phony radio traffic and camouflaged dumps, fooling Axis scouts into expecting a southern thrust, while the real weight fell north with the Australians. The 9th Division's experience from Syria, where they rested after Tobruk, included anti-Vichy French fighting, honing their skills for desert warfare. Personal diaries from diggers describe the pre-battle tension, with card games and letters home masking fear, and the post-assault relief mixed with grief for fallen mates. Italian perspectives reveal resentment toward German allies who fled, leaving them behind, with one POW recounting abandonment as betrayal. The battle also featured innovative tech, like the Scorpion flail tanks that whipped chains to detonate mines, though many broke down under fire. Air support from American P-40s integrated with British squadrons, a harbinger of Allied collaboration. Casualties included not just combat, but disease and accidents, with minefields claiming lives long after, some still dangerous today. Aftermath influenced politics, bolstering Churchill's position and accelerating US involvement, while for Australia, it solidified Anzac legend but prompted troop withdrawals for Japan. In sum, El Alamein was the end of the beginning, a mosaic of heroism, error, and endurance that reshaped World War II.